Late spring, rain season, but the ground's still dry beneath the surface. Every storm feels like a test. Clara Whitlow had lived on the land for nearly 8 years. First as a preacher's daughter from Missouri, then a rancher's wife, and now a widow with 2 children trying to hold onto a property that didn't forgive weakness. Her husband, Jacob, died the winter before last. Fever and coughing that came fast and stayed long. He was gone in 3 days. No time to prepare, no last words worth keeping. Just cold skin and silence. Now Clara ran the place alone, or as alone as a woman could with 2 mouths to feed. Her son Tommy was 10, already tall for his age, too eager to be a man. Her daughter Ellie, 6, barely spoke since Jacob's death. Sweet girl, loved flowers, didn't understand yet how rough the world could get. The house, 2 rooms and a lean-to pantry, wasn't meant for storms. The barn was worse. Half the roof had been patched last fall with whatever she could find, a sheet of tin, an old table flipped over, burlap sacks nailed down tight. She checked it before every storm because she had no choice. If the animals spooked and ran, she wouldn't get them back. If the barn collapsed, she'd lose the tools. And if she lost the goats, she'd lose the milk that kept Ellie fed. Tonight, the wind slammed through the valley with a violence she hadn't seen since the year Jacob died. She stepped out of the house wrapped in a thin coat and one of Jacob's old work scarves. Her boots splashed through standing water as she crossed the yard. The sky was black. No stars, no moon, and a lantern in her hand barely lit more than 5 feet ahead. Each step felt colder. The hem of her dress was already soaked, clinging to her legs. Her breath came fast and shallow, more from tension than the cold. Her eyes darted toward the barn, watching the shadows shift in the storm's gusts. The place leaned slightly west, like it might give up and fall. She muttered under her breath, more out of habit than faith. Hold together. Just one more night. The barn door resisted her. Wet wood and iron nails didn't move easily. She shoved her shoulder into it, grunted, and the door gave way with a sharp crack. The lantern's flame bent hard against the wind as she stepped inside. The animals stirred, goats bleating, chickens shifting nervously in their coop, the mule stamping in its stall. Nothing seemed out of place, not at first. Then she saw the shape. At first glance, it looked like a pile of feed sacks, dark, slumped wet. But something fell off. The light hit leather, then a boot, then a hand. Her stomach flipped. She froze where she stood, heart hammering. She'd never seen a dead man up close, not outside a coffin. But this one wasn't still enough to be dead. He groaned softly, his body twitching with pain. His face was buried in the straw, but she could see his chest rising, slow and shallow. "Jesus," she said aloud, stepping closer. The lantern shook in her hand. He looked like he'd come through hell. His coat was torn up one side, soaked with blood. His shirt clung to his skin. He had one arm wrapped tight around his ribs. The other hand had dirt under the fingernails and a smudge of blood across the knuckles. She didn't recognize him. Not from town, not from church. A stranger. She should have run. Instead, she knelt. "Sir," she asked, voice tight. No answer. "Can you hear me?" The man groaned again, barely louder than the storm outside. She looked around. Nothing to help, no one nearby. If she left him there, he'd die before morning. And she didn't want to bury another man in this soil if she didn't have to. It took everything she had to drag him toward the house. The cabin door flew open hard as she kicked it, half carrying, half dragging the man across the threshold. Mud smeared across the wooden floor as his boots scraped inside. The fire was out. The children were awake, standing wide-eyed near the cold hearth. "Tommy," she said breathlessly, "boil water." "Now." Her son stared at the man for a second before bolting for the stove. "Ellie, get the clean rags." From the chest. Ellie didn't move until Clara barked her name. The little girl nodded and disappeared into the back room. Clara laid the man out on the floor. He was heavy, taller than Jacob, more lean than thick. She yanked his coat open. Blood soaked his side. Knife wound deep, jagged. She pressed a rag against it. He flinched but didn't wake. "Who is he?" Tommy asked from the stove. "I don't know. You gonna keep him here? He's bleeding in my house." I'm not dragging him back into the storm. She opened her sewing kit. It was rusted at the hinges, and half the thread was years old. But it would do. She poured whiskey onto the needle and thread, then over the wound. The man groaned loud, his body arching up from the floor for a second before he fell back. His eyes opened briefly. Brown, alert but fogged over. His gaze landed on her face, held there for a moment, unblinking. Then he went still again. She sewed. Fast, steady. Her hands moved without shaking, but her stomach churned. She kept thinking, what if he's dangerous? What if someone's after him? But she didn't stop. When it was done, she wrapped his torso with a linen strip and gave him water. He drank without opening his eyes. Only after he fell into sleep did she let herself breathe. She sat back, wiped the blood from her hands, and stared at him. Whoever he was, he hadn't come here by accident, and he hadn't gotten that wound falling off a horse. Keep watch, she told Tommy, nodding toward the man. Wake me if he stirs. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat by the window, eyes on the dark horizon, heart pounding steady behind her ribs. The stranger didn't wake again until late the next morning. Clara sat in the same chair she'd used all night, her feet tucked under her skirt, her back stiff from holding herself upright for too long. The fire had died down to soft, red embers, and pale daylight crept through the single window by the stove. Rain still tapped at the roof, lighter now, less like a warning and more like a reminder that the storm hadn't completely passed. Tommy had taken Ellie outside to feed the animals. Clara heard the soft clucking of chickens and her son's muffled voice talking low, trying not to scare the goats. Inside, it was quiet except for the shallow breaths of the man stretched out on her floor. He stirred under the quilt, her husband's old one, the one with the stitched blue corners, and she sat forward without thinking. His hand moved first, then his eyelids. When his eyes opened, they darted around the room. Focused, alert. She stood slowly, stepping into his line of sight, but keeping her hands visible. She didn't want to scare him. He looked like a man used to waking up with a gun in reach. You're in my home, she said, voice low but clear. You were bleeding bad when I found you. By my barn. I stitched you up. His gaze locked on her, and he blinked once. Then again. How long? He rasped. The voice was dry, gravelly, weak. Since last night. Almost a full day. You lost a lot of blood. I didn't ask for your name. He shifted slightly, grimacing. His jaw tightened. He was still trying to figure out if she was a threat. She could see that. Jonas, he said finally. Jonas Kane. She nodded, studying him. He didn't look older than 35. His features were sharp, his cheekbones sunken from exhaustion or hunger. Dirt and blood had dried at his temples, and a faint bruise was forming under one eye. His chest rose and fell slow, but steady. He wasn't out of danger yet, but he wasn't dying anymore. Clara Whitlow, she said in return. This is my home. I live here with my children. You picked a bad time to come through. I didn't mean to. I figure as much. But you're here, and you're hurt. You're not going anywhere for a while. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, eyes scanning the cabin again. She saw the question form in his mind before he asked it. Why'd you help me? She shrugged slightly. Because you were bleeding, and I have children. I didn't want them stepping over a corpse on the way to feed the chickens. He cracked a faint smile, the first expression on his face that didn't look like pain. It disappeared just as quick. Fair enough, he said. She poured him water and brought it to him. He tried to lift himself up on one elbow and hissed through his teeth. She moved quickly, slipping a folded blanket behind his shoulders and lifting his head with more strength than he expected. Drink slow. You'll feel like you're drowning if you rush it. He sipped carefully, not wasting a drop. When he was done, she set the cup aside. He lay back and closed his eyes for a few seconds, then opened them again. You alone here? He asked. She hesitated. No, my son's 10. My daughter's 6. Their father's gone. Been that way 2 winters now. He nodded again, slowly. Sorry. I don't need sorry. I need you not dying on my floor. A pause stretched between them. She could see the questions in his eyes, the ones he wasn't asking yet, like how she managed to keep this place running alone, why she hadn't sold it and gone east, why a woman with 2 children would take in a bleeding man she didn't know. He'd ask those later. if he stuck around long enough to care. She stepped back and started putting a pot of oats on the stove. She moved quietly, efficiently, not because she was trying to impress him, but because routine was what kept the roof overhead. She heard him breathe steady behind her. No threats in that sound. Just a tired man trying to stay upright. 10 minutes later, Tommy walked in carrying a half-filled pail and looked immediately at Jonas. "You awake?" "He is." Tommy stepped closer, cautious but curious. "You got shot or stabbed?" "Stabbed." "You gonna shoot the man who did it?" Jonas didn't answer right away. He turned his head slightly, looked the boy in the eyes. "Not if I don't have to." Clara watched that moment, measured, respectful. Jonas didn't talk down to Tommy, and Tommy didn't look away. She liked that more than she admitted to herself. Ellie peered in from behind Tommy, her tiny fingers gripping the edge of the doorframe. She didn't speak. She just stared at Jonas, then at her mother, then back. "It's all right," Clara told her gently. "He's not going to hurt us." Jonas didn't smile, but he gave Ellie a slow, small nod. And for the first time in weeks, the little girl stepped into the room without hesitation. They ate quietly, Clara and the children at the table, Jonas watching from the floor. She offered him a spoonful once, and he took it without argument. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The ground was soaked, but the air felt cleaner somehow. She looked out the window and felt the slightest relief. They'd made it through the storm. By late afternoon, Jonas was asleep again, deeper this time. His color had returned, and his breathing was stronger. Clara sat near the door, watching the fields, shotgun across her lap. There were things he wasn't saying. A wound like that didn't come for bad luck. Someone meant to kill him. And if they were still looking, they might come through here next. She wasn't afraid of defending her home. She'd done harder things than aim a gun, but she was afraid of getting attached. She didn't need another man she couldn't save. But still, she had to admit, when she looked at Jonas Kane, there was something steady in him. Wounded or not, he didn't panic. He didn't beg. He just endured. That meant something. And if nothing else, her children had smiled today. That hadn't happened in a long, long time. By the end of Jonas Kane's second day in Clara Whitlow's home, the storm had passed, but the tension hadn't. The ground was too soft to work, the barn too wet to risk with tools. So Clara spent the morning cleaning and sharpening the kitchen knives while glancing over at Jonas every few minutes, checking his color, his breathing, the subtle signs of infection she'd learned to watch for after losing Jacob. She didn't say it out loud, but she knew from a moment she sewed him shut that a wound that deep didn't happen by chance. And men who carried knives long enough to get cut by them usually weren't passing through politely. Jonas was conscious longer now, still weak but present. He didn't talk much, but he listened, his eyes sharp even when his body was still. Clara caught him watching the kids, Tommy out the window, Ellie as she played with a piece of cloth on the floor, and she didn't know if he was amused or just studying them like everything else. She'd never seen a man who thought so much before opening his mouth. That could be good or bad, depending on what kind of thoughts he carried. That night, after supper, they all sat together in the main room. Ellie, on the floor with her little cloth dolls, told a story with soft words, half-whispered. Tommy poked the fire with a stick, adding what like he'd seen his father do. Clara watched Jonas from her chair, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The firelight cast long shadows, and the silence felt fuller than it had the night before. Not heavy, just full. Then Jonas spoke, unexpected and quiet. "You fix fences too?" Clara blinked, then nodded once. "As best I can. Looks like you've done everything else." She didn't know if it was a compliment or an observation. Maybe both. Either way, she wasn't used to men saying things like that without a tone. She appreciated that he didn't try to flatter her. There was too much dirt under her nails to make that believable anyway. "You a rancher?" she asked. "No," he said, slow. "Not anymore." She waited for more. When it didn't come, she asked what she already knew was too direct. "Then what are you?" He hesitated, eyes on the fire. "Was a bounty hunter," he said, "for a long time. Before that, I rode with men who didn't ask too many questions. Didn't give answers either." Tommy turned wide-eyed. "You hunted outlaws?" Jonas didn't flinch. Sometimes I just did what I was paid to." That should have scared her. Maybe it did. But what Clara felt most was clarity. Finally, a shape forming around this man on her floor. The wound made sense now. So did the silence. She looked at him different, not as a stranger anymore, but as a man trying to outrun something old. Why'd you stop? He looked her in the eye. Because they kill my brother. It came out flat. No anger, no tremble. Just a fact. It landed in the room like a weight. He wasn't supposed to be with me, Jonas said. Just a favor. One ride. Got caught between two men who wanted me dead, and each other dead worse. That's how it happens. You think you can play the line between law and outlaw. Then someone else pays the price. Clara sat back slowly. She understood that feeling too well. The price of someone else's mistakes landing in your lap. That was half her life since Jacob died. Tommy whispered, "So someone's after you now?" "Probably," Jonas said. Clara didn't ask more. She didn't want names. Not yet. She didn't need to know what crime someone out there thought Jonas had committed. What mattered was that he was alive, her kids were safe, and her house hadn't been burned to the ground. So far, after the children went to bed, she stayed up. He did too, sitting now, not lying down. Still sore, still slow, but more alert. "You ever kill a man?" she asked. He nodded once. "Too many." She didn't flinch. "You regret it?" He looked down at his hands, the roughness of them, the small tattoo barely visible on his inner forearm. Worn, old ink probably done by firelight. She recognized it as something gang-related, but it was too faded to read. "I regret not stopping sooner," he said. That was enough for her. The silence between them after that wasn't awkward. It was mutual, comfortable even. She poured them each a little more coffee, black and bitter, and they drank it in peace. Later that night, when the cabin had gone dark and the fire dropped to embers, Jonas stood by the window, leaning on the frame. His side ached like hell, but he didn't want to lie down again. He watched the tree line, the hills beyond, the empty road that led west. Clara came up beside him, arms folded. "You expect trouble?" "Eventually," he said. "But not tonight." She nodded. "If it comes, you're not fighting it alone." He looked at her. Really looked. She meant it. He could see that. He let out a slow breath, one he hadn't even realized he'd been holding. "All right," he said. They stood in silence again, watching the night. Clara had taken in a wounded man she didn't know. Now, she knew too much to call him a stranger. And Jonas, who had spent most of his life sleeping with one eye open and both hands near a weapon, felt something that unsettled him more than any wound ever had. He felt safe, for the first time in years, and that scared him. The morning sun came late and slow, dragging itself across the horizon like it didn't want to get up either. The storm had blown itself out, and what was left behind was soaked soil, scattered twigs, and the kind of cold that stuck in your boots. Clara was already outside, apron over her dress, boots half-laced, pulling water from the well, and eyeing the pasture with a tired kind of calculation. Everything needed fixing. Again, Jonas was on his feet for the first time since he'd arrived. Not steady, not quick, but upright. He stood on the cabin porch, one hand braced on the beam, the other gripping the edge of the doorframe like he didn't fully trust his legs yet. He didn't say anything, just watched. Clara glanced back, her face unreadable. She didn't offer help. He didn't ask. By mid-morning, he was walking slow laps around the yard. Ellie watched from the fence line, where she was gathering weeds to make pretend soup. Tommy hovered near Jonas, like a dog waiting for attention, but too proud to ask. "You know how to fix a broken gate?" Tommy asked finally. Jonas looked at him, then at the warped boards tied with baling wire and wishful thinking. "Yeah," he said, "but you're doing it wrong." Tommy grinned, then grabbed a hammer. For the next hour, Jonas leaned into the work. His side ached with every bend, every lift, every damn twist of the hammer, but he didn't let it show. Clara came out at one point, handed them both water, and stood back as they worked together. Tommy listened close, did what he was told, didn't talk too much. Jonas appreciated that. "Your father teach you this?" Jonas asked. Tommy shook his head. "Ma did." Jonas glanced up toward the house, where Clara stood now, sweeping the porch. "She teach you to shoot too?" "No," Tommy said, lowering his voice. "She hates guns." Jonas didn't press the point. Later, when the chores were done and the gate held firm, Clara brought them salted bread and beans. They ate on the porch, quiet, no need for talk. In the afternoon, Ellie brought Jonas a handful of wild flowers and handed them to him without a word. He looked at the delicate stems, held them clumsily, unsure what to do. Clara watched the exchange from the window, her expression softening. She didn't say anything, but she noticed he didn't set the flowers down for a long while. By evening, the air had warmed slightly, and the smell of baked bread drifted from the kitchen. Clara was kneading the next day's dough on the long table. Jonas walked in, slower now, but steadier. She didn't look up. "You cook too?" he asked. "Not well," she answered, "but I know enough to keep the kids fed." He stepped closer. "Mind if I learn?" She paused, looked at him, then stepped aside and nodded. The dough was stubborn. Jonas had strong hands, but no rhythm. Clara watched him fight with the mix like it owed him something. She took his hands mid-motion and showed him gentler, fold, press, roll. He didn't flinch at the contact, but he didn't speak either. Her fingers on his were calloused, strong. The moment stretched, and she let go. "You can't bully dough," she said. "Noted," he replied quietly. That night, they sat outside under a clean sky. The stars finally showed up. Tommy leaned against the porch post, half asleep. Ellie curled on Clara's lap. "You got a plan?" Clara asked Jonas, low voice. "Not yet," he said, "but I'll work for my keep. I'm not charging rent." He nodded. Still, silence settled again. It was the kind of silence that came from people who didn't need to pretend. A good silence. Then Jonas added, "I can teach Tommy to shoot. When you're ready." Clara didn't answer right away. She looked down at Ellie, then out at the land. "Maybe," she said finally, "but I don't want him learning what you ran from." "I wouldn't teach him that." "Good," she said, "because we've had enough men pass through with nothing behind their eyes." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Inside, the lantern burned low. The home was quiet, whole for now. No gunshots, no hoofbeats, just creaking wood and breathing. Jonas Kane lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks, staring at the ceiling. He still didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't know if the men who wanted him dead were closing in or if they'd forgotten about him entirely. He didn't know if he deserved this peace or if it was just another stop before something worse. But he knew one thing. He wanted to stay. And for a man like him, that meant trouble was already on the way. It started with the sound of hooves. Faint, distant, no more than a whisper through the dry grass. Jonas heard it first. It was early, just past dawn. He'd gotten into the habit of rising before the sun, stretching the stiffness from his side, and walking the perimeter while the world was still cold and half asleep. Clara usually lit the stove around that time. The kids wouldn't be up for another hour. He froze halfway between the barn and the back fence when he heard it. The unmistakable rhythm of two horses moving fast, then slowing, not on the main road, but circling wide through the low hills behind the property. He crouched near the water trough, eyes scanning the horizon. Too far to see clearly, but not far enough for comfort. He moved quickly back toward the house, his side aching with every step. The second he stepped inside, Clara turned from the stove. "Something's wrong," she said immediately, seeing his face. "Horses," Jonas said. "Two riders. Circling wide." Clara didn't ask why. She trusted his instincts now, and that trust showed in the way she moved. She put down the spoon, untied her apron, and grabbed the rifle from the wall. Tommy appeared in the hallway, barefoot and yawning. He stopped when he saw their expressions. "What's going on?" "Get Ellie," Clara said, firm but calm. "Go to the cellar. Quiet. Now." Tommy didn't argue. He disappeared, and within seconds, came back holding Ellie's hand. The girl was still half asleep, her eyes wide but silent. Jonas watched them disappear down the cellar steps before he turned back to Clara. "I don't know if it's them," he said, "but I'm not betting otherwise." He opened the bottom drawer and found the revolver Clara had kept hidden under a folded shirt. He checked the chamber. 5 rounds. That would have to be enough. They took positions, Clara at the front window, Jonas at the side. The place had no real fortification. It wasn't meant for defense, just thick wood walls and hope. Then they waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The tension grew. Sweat started to gather under Jonas's collar despite the morning chill. Clara's grip on the rifle tightened. Then came a knock. Not on the door. On the barn. 3 quick taps. Deliberate. Jonas moved first. He stepped out the side door and skirted around the house, staying low behind the brush. Clara watched through the front window, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. When Jonas got close enough, he saw the rider, alone now. Dismounted, leaning casually against the barn wall like he had every right to be there. Long coat, clean boots, a pistol slung low on one hip, not drawn but resting easy. The man didn't see Jonas until he stepped into view with the revolver raised. "Don't move," Jonas said flatly. The man turned his head slowly. No fear in his eyes, just recognition. "Well, hell," he said, smiling. "Didn't think I'd find you this far out." "Name," Jonas said. "Derek Long," the man replied. "Not that names matter much, considering." Jonas took a step closer. "You alone?" "Not for long." Jonas lowered the revolver just slightly. "Who sent you? Who do you think?" Jonas didn't need an answer. It was the same crew that had turned on him. The same crew that had put a bullet in his brother and called it business. "You gonna shoot me?" Derek asked, that smile never slipping. "Because I'll tell you right now, you do, someone else is coming right behind me. This don't stop with me. I'm not giving you that chance. I'm not here to kill you, Kane. Not today. Just scouting. Just letting you know we know." Jonas stepped closer. The revolver touched the man's chest now. "Get back on your horse. You really think this place is gonna hold? You playing farmer now?" Jonas's eyes narrowed. "Go." Derek stepped back slowly, mounted his horse with practiced ease, and tipped his hat before riding off. No rush, no fear. Just a message delivered. By the time Jonas came back inside, Clara had the kids upstairs. She turned the second she saw him. "Talk. Scout. One of the old crew. Want me to know they're close." Clara's jaw tensed. "You think they're coming?" "They are." "When?" He shook his head. "Soon. They don't let debts sit." Clara's mind moved faster than her words. "How many?" "At least 3 more. Maybe 5. Depends who he's still riding with." She looked at the windows, the doors, the tools. Her eyes stopped on the barn. Then she looked at Jonas. "Then we get ready." The next 2 days were spent preparing. They didn't have much in the way of weapons, just the rifle, Jonas's revolver, and a few old traps. But they knew the land. Jonas marked high ground for watching. Clara moved supplies into the cellar. Tommy learned fast how to reload, how to patch holes in the barn wall, how to stay quiet when it mattered. And in all of it, there was no panic, just purpose. Each night, Jonas sat outside, watching the road. Clara joined him once, long after the children were asleep. "You could leave," she said. "I know. You won't." "I can't." They sat in silence. And when she reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. The 4th morning after the scout came and went like any other. Cold air, low mist, quiet fields. But Jonas Kane knew the silence was wrong. The birds weren't singing. The trees barely moved. Something in the land had shifted, like it was holding its breath. He stood near the barn, rifle in hand, watching the edge of the hills. Clara walked up behind him, tied her hair back with one of Ellie's worn ribbons. "How close?" she asked. "They're here. I can feel it." He'd said little over the past 2 days. Kept to himself, building traps near the fence line, reinforcing the back wall of the barn with whatever they had left. Tommy helped him dig trenches and carry water. Clara managed the inside, keeping the children calm, keeping them close. Not once did she try to convince Jonas to leave. Not once did she question whether he was worth the trouble. By late morning, they saw the dust cloud. 4 riders, no more than a half-mile out, coming fast, then slowing once the house came into view. Jonas and Clara moved quick, kids into the cellar, weapons loaded, positions taken. Jonas didn't panic. He moved with the cold calculation of a man who'd done this before, too many times, and lost too much to ever take it lightly again. He took his position in the barn loft, the rifle steadied between 2 beams. Claire stayed near the front porch, her own rifle resting on the doorframe. The riders didn't charge. They spread out, slow, methodical, like they'd done this before, too. The first voice came loud and mocking. "Kane, I know you're in there. Come out and we'll talk proper." Jonas didn't answer. He lined the crosshairs on the man who spoke, tall, thick coat, scarred neck. Then another voice, sharper. That woman's got nothing to do with this. Don't make us do something we don't want to. Jonas said nothing. Clara's fingers curled tighter around the wood of her rifle. Her jaw was set. Her eyes stayed locked on the trail. The first shot came without warning. A loud crack from the left side. Clara flinched but didn't move. Jonas returned fire, fast and precise. One of the men fell from his horse with a cry, landing hard in the dirt. That changed everything. The others scattered, using the fence and brush for cover. Gunfire erupted, sharp and quick. The sound echoed off the hills. Bullets struck the porch rail, the barn wall, one shattering the window above the kitchen. Clara ducked back, reloading quickly. Her hands moved steady. She didn't think about the children underground. She didn't let herself picture Ellie's wide eyes or Tommy's fists clenched tight. She focused on the rifle on the next shot. Jonas moved across the loft like he'd done it 100 times. Each shot he took was deliberate. He wasn't trying to kill everyone. He was trying to end it without blood, but blood always came. Then, the fourth man, the same scout from days earlier, broke from cover, charging for the house. Jonas fired once, missed. Clara didn't. Her shot hit him in the leg. He collapsed with a scream, sliding in the dirt. The others panicked, and Jonas knew this was the moment. He stood up fully in the barn loft, shoulders squared. He raised a rifle and shouted, voice like iron. You came here for me. She has nothing to do with this. You come any closer, and I will bury every one of you where you stand. Silence followed. Then a voice cracked. You're a dead man either way, Kane. Jonas stepped forward, fully visible now. Then you'd better aim better than you did today. The riders hesitated. Their eyes flicked between him and the house. They saw the porch riddled with bullet holes, the windows shattered. But they also saw Clara standing, unflinching. They saw Jonas ready to die for this place. And they knew they hadn't won. The last two riders backed off slowly, then galloped away. Jonas stayed where he was, rifle raised, until the dust disappeared. Only then did he lower it. The pain in his side returned all at once. He nearly collapsed getting down from the loft. Clara met him at the barn door. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him, her breath tight, her hands shaking. You all right? He asked. You? He nodded. She stepped forward. They were too close now for words. Down in the cellar, the children waited in silence. When Clara opened the door, Ellie ran into her arms. Tommy grabbed Jonas, burying his face in the man's side. Jonas stiffened for half a second, then hugged the boy back. That night, they buried the one man who didn't ride away. Clara and Jonas dug the grave. No ceremony, just dirt and sweat. Later, they sat by the fire. The kids asleep, the rifles stacked by the door. I knew they'd come, Jonas said. Didn't think I'd care who got caught in the crossfire. Clara didn't speak. But I did, he said. She looked at him. You didn't run. I thought about it. And I didn't want to leave. He looked down at his hands. Dirt under the nails. Blood at the cuff. I never stayed anywhere before, he said. Not really. Never had a reason. Clara reached over, slowly, and placed her hand on his. You do now, she said. He didn't move. Didn't speak. But he stayed. And for the first time, Jonas Kane didn't feel like a man hiding from his past. He felt like a man with something worth fighting for. 3 weeks passed since the shootout. The fields had dried. The fences were repaired. The shattered window was replaced with a thick slab of salvaged glass Jonas and Tommy hauled from an abandoned mining shack 12 miles west. Everything moved slower now, no longer because of fear, but because the urgency had lifted. Jonas never left. No one asked him to stay. No one asked him to explain why he hadn't ridden off after the threat was gone. He simply didn't go. Every morning, he got up before the sun. He checked the pasture, walked the fence, brought water in, sometimes with Tommy at his side, sometimes alone. He slept in the spare bed Jacob once used when he was too sick to climb into the loft. He kept his revolver in a drawer and the rifle above the door, not as a warning, but as a tool like the shovel and hammer. His side still ached. The wound hadn't gone bad, but the scar pulled when he moved wrong. Clara caught him grimacing once. She said nothing, just handed him a flask of willow bark tea and walked off. They didn't need to talk much anymore. Trust had replaced doubt. One late afternoon, after dinner, Ellie climbed into Jonas's lap without asking. She handed him a half-crumbled drawing. Just stick figures, one tall with a hat, two small ones, and a woman beside a house. She pointed at the tall figure. "That's you." Jonas looked down at her, blinked, and swallowed hard. "You drew me too tall," he said quietly. She grinned and didn't move. Tommy, watching from the doorway, asked the question out loud for the first time. "You staying?" Jonas looked at Clara, who was leaning by the sink drying dishes. "Yes," he said. "I'm staying." There was no pause. No hesitation. Clara didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped the way they hadn't in a long time, like something had finally settled in place. The next few days passed with the easy rhythm of honest work. Jonas fixed the barn door. Clara taught him how to grind cornmeal. Ellie began asking for bedtime stories again. Tommy followed Jonas everywhere, not like a shadow, but like a student. Jonas taught him how to ride, how to use a rifle safely, how to track animals by their prints instead of noise, how to build a proper fire and sleep with one ear open, just in case. And in those moments, something shifted. Jonas stopped watching the road. One morning, Clara found him sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, a piece of rope in his fingers, idly tying and readying knots. She sat beside him. They looked out over the pasture. The goats wandered peacefully. The mules snorted at nothing. "Still waiting for trouble?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, not anymore." She sipped her coffee, then looked at him directly. "I need a man here. Not a hired hand. Not a visitor. A man. For this house. For my children. For me." Jonas met her gaze. "I know," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." That night, they all sat around the table. Clara served stew and biscuits. The fire crackled, and the air was filled with nothing but laughter, Ellie's tiny giggle, Tommy's excited talk about setting traps with Jonas. Later, when the kids were asleep, Jonas stepped out into the cool night. The stars were clear. The wind was soft. He walked to the barn, checked the latch, looked at the road one last time, then turned his back on it. When he came inside, Clara was standing there, the oil lamp casting shadows across her face. She stepped forward. He didn't move. She placed a hand on his chest, steady. "You're home now," she said. And that was it. No questions left. No detsambath. No fears hidden behind silence. The man who once lived by the gun now lived by the land. The woman who once mourned alone now shared her strength with someone who earned it. The children who had only known loss now had laughter again. And the homestead, battered by wind and time, finally felt like something more than survival. It felt like life.